The legend of Timothy's untold story was so dark that if any children were told about it by mishap, they would get nightmares and scream out at night. But the story was never revealed to the Fat Controller's engines until now. One foggy evening, Percy was returning home after a hard day's work at the docks. He was tired and in need of a long rest. He was travelling along a route which he knew of. It was a shortcut to get home. Percy knew where he was, even in the dark.
It should be long now, for I'm nearing Crow's Farm Crossing.
Crow's Farm Crossing was located near Heckenbeak, which was a small hamlet serving as a halt on Thomas's branch line. As Percy continued his run, the rails hummed and the signal lights shone green. Then he heard a whistle that was not familiar to him. Followed by a voice echoing in the darkness. Children, children. Percy was confused. He slowed down and whistled back.
Hello? Is anyone there?
Something wicked this way comes!
I like children. I like children. Percy was getting more confused. As he was about to cross Crow's Farm Crossing, he and his crew both gasped in horror as another engine shot out from the fog. Percy wailed out, whistling long and loud as he closed his eyes, expecting a crash. But then silence quickly fell. Cautiously, Percy opened one of his eyes. His driver and fireman looked out from opposite sides from the cab. No one was there.
What in Satan's name was that?
It looked like an engine, but that was no kind of engine, but it looked enough.
That was a ghost train. It's not like the one that we were told about, but that was so realistic and terrifying.
Oh yeah! Oh no!
Then the driver paused. He began to remember something from long ago.
Percy, remember the time I told you about the ghost story about the one that I saw the night before and was to be a pretend ghost on television? I'm just beginning to think that possibly. No, I'm not kidding here. I believe that now it was not a fake story at all. It was real. I was wrong. The ghost train was real!
Percy's wheels shivered at the thought if his driver was believing the story that he had told him. But even he was starting to have second doubts about it. And he was still thinking about it when he made it back to the sheds.
Where have you been?
But just who was the mysterious and horrifying ghost engine that he and his crew saw? The next morning, Percy was still feeling shocked from last night. All day he kept on thinking about who the ghost train was, and whether or not his driver's story was really true or still made up. The little green engine could remember the time years ago he was told about it, and then telling about it to Thomas and Toby. Thomas didn't believe it, and later got a fright from Percy after his accident with a cart of lime. It all seemed like yesterday, but both Thomas and Percy had not forgotten about it. At the sheds, Thomas and Toby were being looked at by engineers. Outside, the weather had changed. The mist had come down, and it was crawling along the rails.
That's static electricity, Ed. Did you know that this treasure trove of accessible energy lies right beneath our feet?
At that moment, Percy puffed in after delivering the mail train. But Thomas could see that his friend was not looking his normal self.
Percy, are you okay?
Silas, you might find this crazy, but it's hard to believe, but I saw a ghost train. But it's not like any other. It's so scary and very demonic, as if it came from the underworld. And when I saw it, it was coming straight at me, and by the time I opened my eyes, it was gone.
That's some story. And most of all over the top. A ghost train that looks demonic? That's mostly something you'd see out of a horror movie.
Did you get a good view of it? What did he look like?
I couldn't tell, it was happening so fast.
Surely your mind was only playing a trick on you. Or perhaps you're remembering about the event years ago when you pulled off that ghost prank on me when you were pretending to be the ghost train from that made-up story your driver told you.
That's just it, Thomas. Remember when my driver told me about that story? He now thinks that it's real, and the ghost train does indeed exist.
Wait. This was all made up, and now years later, your driver's changing it to thinking it's real. Come on, Per. See, ghost stories are there for a reason. They're there to give us a scare, and not like in scaring us to death or something.
You can all go on about this, but that ghost train story that I told Percy a long time ago seems to come back and haunt me.
What do you mean?
The story that I told was for real. When I was looking through the documents of past accidents and incidents, I stumbled across one that had not been looked at in a very long time. The records showed about an engine who had a tragic crash and left behind a haunting story that was only have been recently told. The event happened a long time ago, way before Thomas, Percy, and Toby came to the railway. The train was taking passengers home when, according to the reports from the investigators, its brakes failed and the engine continued on going until it ran off a cliff, which was where the viaduct was built many years later. The engine crashed, killing everyone. But as the decades went by, witnesses claimed to have seen a ghost train running along the anniversary of its accident. Even I saw it, but I got a better look and saw its face. The engine had a very cold presence, one that I never felt before. He had an evil and demonic look that only the devil himself could describe. The engine had a number 0 on his side with 6 small wheels and was painted silver.
An engine with 6 wheels, painted silver, and the number 0. Who was he?
The engine's overall appearance was just like you, Thomas. And his name was Timothy. Why, bless my bell!
So the ghost train that I saw was him!
It seems to be, now that I remember it. It fitted the story of how it came together.
Timothy was an engine who looked like me? But I never saw him or ever met him before. How is this even possible that he can resemble me?
No one replied. The shed had gone quiet. Thomas was still in a state of shock. Toby was confused, and Percy was left with so many questions flying around in his smoke box. The truth in finding out who the ghost train was had been told at last. The next day, things on the branch line ran as normal. Thomas, Toby and Daisy took passengers, while Percy was shunting in the yard. The branch line was getting more busier as the week went on, as the summer season progressed. Thomas soon had to do some yard shunting, while Percy took over in pulling his coaches. Toby and Percy were sent to take some stone trucks from the quarry down to Wellsworth, where Edward was to take it to the docks. As they watched the train depart, the subject on Timothy began to play on their minds again. Thomas, on the other hand, continued on taking passenger services and workmen to locations that needed repairing. By the time the week had gone, the engines were totally exhausted.